Mark's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Do you dare to enter? Deadhouse awaits you. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Is this some kind of scam? Mark smirked. No, it's that house. The one people talk about. The one where folks go in, but don't come out. Or if they do, they ain't the same. Lisa exhaled. So, we going? Mark's grin widened. Obviously. That night, they drove out of the city down the highway, where streetlights faded and the road twisted into darkness. An hour later, they reached it. A decayed wooden structure, broken windows, and the stench of damp rot clinging to the air. Welcome to the Deadhouse, Mark muttered. The front door wasn't locked. It creaked open with a light push. The moment they stepped inside, a chill crawled over their skin. Hello? Lisa's voice echoed. Silence. Then the door slammed shut. Lisa spun around. The handle was gone. Mark turned on his phone's flashlight. Shit, anybody here? And then at the top of the stairs a figure stood. Tall, motionless, its eyes black, empty voids. Then it tilted its head and charged straight at them. Mark barely had time to react before the figure lunged. His instincts kicked in and he grabbed Lisa's arm, pulling her backward as the air around them grew heavy, suffocating almost. The thing, whatever it was, moved unnaturally fast, its limbs jerking in odd angles, its footsteps silent despite its speed. Mark could feel his pulse hammering against his skull as he stumbled back, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The beam of light flickered over the figure's face for just a second, and that was enough to send a jolt of pure terror through him. It wasn't just black eyes. There were no eyes. Just dark, gaping holes where human features should have been. And its mouth, stitched shut with what looked like rusted wire. The thing stopped abruptly just a few feet away, its head twitching like it was trying to process them, to understand them. The sound that followed was worse than any scream. A guttural, wet, inhuman noise, like something trying to breathe through waterlogged lungs. Lisa clutched Mark's arm so tightly he could feel her nails digging into his skin. But he didn't flinch. He couldn't. They were trapped inside this god-forsaken house, and whatever was standing in front of them was very, very real. The room around them seemed to darken, as if the very walls were absorbing the weak light from Mark's phone. The wallpaper, once a dull shade of green, now looked almost black, shifting as though something underneath was breathing, expanding and contracting in slow, rhythmic pulses. The air was thick with the smell of decay, of something rotting deep within the bones of the house. Mark swallowed hard, trying to ignore the metallic taste of fear coating his tongue. He forced himself to move, inching sideways, trying to put some distance between them and the thing. But as soon as he shifted, so did it, mirroring his movements perfectly. Lisa let out a shaky breath, barely above a whisper. Mark, it's watching us. The figure twitched again, its head snapping to Lisa in one quick motion. A low, raspy sound escaped its throat, like the creak of an old wooden door slowly swinging open. Then, without warning, the lights overhead flickered to life, casting the room in a sickly yellow glow. For the first time, Mark could see the full extent of the horror standing before them. The figure wasn't alone. The entire staircase was lined with them. Shadowy, silent figures, all standing perfectly still. Their bodies were human-shaped but wrong. Twisted, elongated limbs, spines bent at angles that shouldn't be possible. Each of them had the same hollow eyes, the same stitched mouths. Lisa's grip on his arm tightened as she took an involuntary step back. Mark, we need to get out. Now. But where? The door they had come through was gone. Not just locked. Gone. In its place, there was nothing but a blank stretch of decayed wall, as if an entrance had never existed there to begin with. Mark's breathing quickened, his mind racing for a plan, a way out. His eyes darted to the hallway on the left, barely visible in the dim light. If they could just make it there, find another door, another exit, anything. But as soon as he took a step in that direction, the figures reacted. Their heads snapped toward him in unison, their movements eerily synchronized. And then, without any sound, without any warning, they moved. It wasn't like walking, it wasn't like running. They glided forward, their feet never lifting from the ground, their bodies jerking like marionettes controlled by unseen hands. The flickering light overhead made their shadows stretch and distort across the walls, making it impossible to tell just how many of them there were. Mark grabbed Lisa's wrist, yanking her towards the hallway. "Go, now!" They sprinted, their footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence of the house. Mark's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. The hallway was long, too long. The further they ran, the more distorted the space around them became. The walls seemed to bend inward, narrowing as if trying to squeeze them, swallow them whole. The floor beneath them creaked, the wood splintering with each step, but there was no turning back now. Lisa let out a sharp gasp, stumbling as the ground beneath her suddenly shifted. Mark barely managed to catch her before she fell, but when he looked down, his blood ran cold. The floorboards weren't just cracking, they were moving. The wooden planks twisted and coiled like living things, writhing beneath their feet. Mark pulled Lisa up, but before they could move, something reached for them. A hand. No, not a hand, something worse. It shot up from between the cracks in the floor, long, skeletal fingers grasping wildly. The skin stretched too tight over the bones, the nails broken and jagged. More hands followed, clawing their way up from the darkness beneath, their touch freezing cold. Mark kicked at them, his boot connecting with brittle fingers that snapped too easily, like dried twigs. But for every hand he broke, two more took its place. Lisa was screaming now, her voice raw with panic. Mark grabbed her, forcing them both forward, tearing through the hallway as the grasping hands scraped against their legs, leaving behind thin, burning cuts. The end of the corridor was in sight, a door barely hanging on its hinges. Mark threw his weight against it, and the wood gave way with a splintering crack. They stumbled through, collapsing onto the floor of what looked like an old dining room. The long wooden table in the center was covered in dust. The chairs surrounding it toppled over as if someone had left in a hurry. The walls were lined with old portraits, but the faces in the paintings were wrong. Blurred, distorted, with hollow black eyes that seemed to follow them. For a moment, silence. Just the sound of their ragged breathing. Then, slow, deliberate footsteps. Not from the hallway, from inside the room. Lisa turned her head slowly. In the far corner, a figure stood. Not one of these stitched-mouthed creatures from before. This was something else. Taller. Its limbs too thin, its head slightly tilted, and when it moved, it did so in a slow, unnatural way, like it was learning how to walk. And then it smiled. Not with its mouth, it had no mouth, but Mark and Lisa felt the smile, deep in their bones, in the pit of their stomachs, like something curling its fingers around their very souls. The lights flickered, and the thing took a step forward, then another. The door behind them slammed shut, and the Deadhouse began to wake. The temperature in the room dropped so suddenly that Mark could see his breath fogging in front of him. Lisa clutched his arm, her nails digging into his skin, but he barely noticed. His eyes were locked on the figure in the corner. It didn't just stand there. It twitched in short, jerky spasms like a puppet whose strings were being yanked by an unseen force. Its head tilted to one side with a sickening crack, and the room itself seemed to shift with it, the walls groaning as if they were alive. The thing had no mouth, yet Mark and Lisa could feel it grinning at them, an invisible smirk stretching across the air like a pressure pushing against their chests. Then, without warning, the lights went out. The darkness was absolute, not the kind where your eyes eventually adjust. This was something deeper, heavier, suffocating. Lisa gasped, her breath hitching as she fumbled for Mark's hand in the pitch black. The room felt like it was expanding, stretching into an abyss. Mark's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he squeezed Lisa's fingers, grounding himself. And then the whispering started. Not one voice, many. Soft overlapping murmurs that slithered through the darkness like unseen tendrils. Some too close, almost brushing against their ears. Others distant, like echoes from another realm. He sees you. You don't belong here. Run. A flicker. Just a moment of vision as the dim yellow light sputtered back for a second, and the figure was right in front of them, inches away. Lisa screamed. Mark yanked her backward just as the light cut out again, the whispering rising into an unbearable chorus of voices. Footsteps, not theirs, scraped against the wooden floor, circling them. Something brushed against Mark's arm, icy and sharp, like bone. Then the lights flickered again, and the thing was gone. But the dining room had changed. The long table was no longer covered in dust. It was set. Plates, silverware, tall candlesticks flickering with eerie blue flames. The chairs were upright, and they weren't empty. Figures sat in them, dozens of them. Each one motionless, dressed in tattered, old-fashioned clothing, their faces obscured by black veils. A terrible realization settled in Mark's gut like lead. These weren't just decorations, they were waiting. A chair at the head of the table creaked as it slowly pulled itself out. An invitation. Lisa was shaking, whispering, "We need to get out of here, Mark, please." He knew she was right, but his legs refused to move. His body was locked in place by something unseen, something cold wrapping around his spine like a vice. His fingers twitched towards the seat in front of him, compelled by a force he didn't understand. Then, bang! The sound of a door slamming somewhere in the house broke the trance. Lisa grabbed Mark's wrist and pulled him back, snapping him out of it. The moment they moved, the figures at the table turned their heads in unison. All of them. Underneath the veils, there were no faces, just skin. A single breath of silence. Then the figures stood. Mark and Lisa didn't wait. They ran. Through the hallway, past shifting shadows that seemed to reach for them. The walls themselves felt like they were closing in, stretching unnaturally, doors disappearing before they could reach them. Footsteps, heavy, fast, inhuman, followed them, closing the distance. Lisa let out a sob as she pulled Mark toward a staircase leading downward. A basement. It was a stupid idea, but there was nowhere else to go. They reached the bottom just as the door at the top slammed shut on its own, locking them in. Silence. Then something breathed. Deep, slow, right behind them. Lisa turned first. Mark saw her eyes widen in sheer terror. Then everything went black. Mark's consciousness flickered like a dying bulb. 1 second he was running. The next, darkness. A void so complete it felt like being swallowed whole. His mind screamed at him to move, but his body was trapped, suspended in something thick and cold. His lungs burned. He tried to breathe, but couldn't. It was like drowning without water. Then suddenly he dropped. His body slammed onto something solid, knocking the wind from his lungs. He gasped, inhaling dust and decay, his fingers clawing at the damp wooden floor beneath him. His mind was a blur of panic and confusion. Where was Lisa? Lisa! His voice cracked. It sounded wrong, hollow, like the house itself had swallowed his words. He scrambled up, his legs unsteady, his heartbeat a frantic drum against his ribs. He wasn't in the basement anymore. The room around him was vast and impossible. The ceiling stretched too high, disappearing into shadows, and the walls twisted at unnatural angles, as if the house had warped into something non-Euclidean, something that shouldn't exist. In the center of the room stood a chair, and Lisa was in it. Her body was rigid, her hands nailed to the armrests with rusted iron spikes. Her head was tilted slightly downward, strands of her hair covering her face. She wasn't moving. Mark froze. His stomach twisted. A cold sweat broke across his skin. Then, Lisa's head snapped up. Her eyes weren't hers. They were black, bottomless voids, swirling like ink spreading through water. Her lips parted, but when she spoke, it wasn't her voice. "You shouldn't have come here." Mark stumbled backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Lisa, what the fuck?" "She is gone," the voice interrupted, layered with something else, something ancient. "And soon, so will you." The lights flickered, the walls moved, and from the darkness they came. Figures, shifting and writhing, emerging from the walls like shadows peeling themselves free. Their faces were featureless, their limbs twisted and jerking as they dragged themselves toward him. Mark's instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet wouldn't move. Lisa, or whatever wore her body, tilted its head. Then, in an instant, the figures rushed him. Mark barely had time to react before icy hands seized his arms, his legs, his throat. He struggled, kicking, thrashing, but their grip was unbreakable. Their touch burned like frostbite sinking deep into his bones. His vision blurred as they pulled him downward, into the floor. No, into something else. It wasn't wood anymore. It was flesh. The ground beneath him pulsed like a living organism, veins throbbing, skin stretching as the hands dragged him deeper. He could feel it swallowing him, suffocating him, his body sinking inch by inch. He was becoming part of the house. Lisa's voice, not hers, whispered in his ear. "Now you understand." Mark tried to scream and then silence. Mark awoke with a violent gasp, his body jerking as if breaking the surface after drowning in deep, endless water. But there was no water, only darkness, thick and suffocating, pressing against his skin like something alive. He couldn't tell if he was lying down or floating, if his limbs were his own, or if they had been stolen, replaced with something not quite human. His breath came in shallow, uneven gasps, his lungs aching as though they had forgotten how to function. A deep, primal terror clawed at his gut, a terror that had no name, no source, just a suffocating certainty that he was no longer in the world he had known. His fingers curled against the ground beneath him, but it didn't feel like wood anymore. It felt like skin, cold, damp, pulsing. The realization sent a violent shudder through his spine, bile rising in his throat. He wanted to move, to run, to scream, but something held him down. Not physically, but through sheer, crushing will. The house was not just a place. It was not just haunted. It was alive. And now it was watching him. A sound slithered through the darkness, a wet, dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Mark's breath hitched as he turned his head, every muscle in his body stiff with terror. At first, he saw nothing, just shadows shifting in the void, swirling like black smoke. But then, it stepped forward. The thing that had spoken with Lisa's voice, no longer wearing her skin, but something else, something worse. Its body was elongated, stretched beyond human proportions, its arms too long, its fingers ending in jagged, broken nails that scraped against the pulsing floor. Its face was a hollow void, an absence of features, as if the universe had erased any trace of its identity. But its eyes, they were there, not on its face but everywhere, embedded in its skin, blinking from its shoulders, its arms, its chest. Dozens of them, all staring at him, their pupils dilating in unison, as if seeing him for the first time. "You were warned," it said, and the voice was inside his head, crawling through his thoughts like worms burrowing into his skull. Mark's body convulsed as pain ripped through his mind, a sensation like needles stabbing into his brain, each word the creature spoke carving itself into his bones. He felt himself slipping, his identity unraveling like frayed threads. The house wasn't trying to kill him. That would have been merciful. No, it was doing something far worse. It was rewriting him. His memories flickered. His childhood home, his mother's laughter, the feeling of sunlight on his skin, gone. Replaced by something else. A new past. A past where he had always been here. Where he had always belonged to the house. He clutched his head, his breath coming in ragged gasps, trying to hold on to himself. Trying to fight. Lisa, he choked out, the name barely escaping his lips, but even as he said it, the word felt foreign. Wrong. As if Lisa had never existed. As if she had been nothing but a dream. The creature took another step forward, and the walls shifted. The house breathed, its bones creaking, the air thick with the scent of rotten blood. The darkness around him wasn't just emptiness, it was moving. Writhing shapes twisted in the corners of his vision, human forms bent at impossible angles, their mouths stretched in silent screams. "You are not Mark anymore," the thing whispered. And Mark felt something inside him crack. A single splintering fracture in the fabric of his being. The first step toward becoming something else. Something that belonged to the house. And that's where Deadhouse Part 1 ends. But this is just the beginning. The house isn't done with Mark yet, not even close. What happened to Lisa? Is she still alive? Or was she never real to begin with? And what is this place? This breathing, living nightmare that refuses to let him go? You don't want to miss what happens next. Deadhouse Part 1 drops in just 1 days. And trust me, it's about to get way worse. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon, because when the next chapter arrives, the house will be waiting.